Let's build Meng's Luftwaffe bomber destroyer, the powerful Messerschmitt Me 410 A1 U2. In 1937, the Luftwaffe realized the Messerschmitt Me 110 was becoming obsolete even before the war started, and work began on a replacement. The Me 210 was born as a fast bomber with an internal bomb bay, but serious design and performance flaws were observed. New engines, a lengthened fuselage, and leading-edge slats were added, and the new aircraft was so refined it was given a new name, the Me 410 Hornet. As with most Luftwaffe World War II aircraft, all interior surfaces outside the cockpit were painted RLM2 gray. Here I begin picking out details in the 410's modular gun and bomb bay, which could receive different armament, bomb, or camera packages depending upon the mission profile. The A1 U2 variant was particularly lethal, armed with 6 20mm MG 151 cannon and 2 7.92mm MG-17 forward-firing weapons, and 2 13mm MG-131 machine guns for rear defense. The 20mm and larger rounds were particularly nasty due to being explosive rounds. A heavily thinned wash is applied to simulate shadow, dirt, and grime. Work begins on the very busy cockpit. This area was enhanced with 3D printed rudder pedals for matters of scale and 3D decals from Quinta. RLM 66 Gray, the standard Luftwaffe cockpit color, is laid down in preparation for the 3D decals. Although there is adhesive on 3D decals, it's best to glue them down with PVA glue. A brush coat of clear, flat lacquer goes a long way towards hiding the pixelated finish on printed decals and photo etch. Eduard pre-painted photo-etched seatbelts round out the excellent kit cockpit. Here I add lead wire running to the instruments on the rear gunner compartment. The rear gunner, or board funker, was also responsible for manning the radios and serving as navigator. This area also received RLM 66 paint, Quinta 3D decals, and Eduard seatbelts. You'll note the board funker's seat has no shoulder harness so the crew member can lean forward to reach the radios. The detail added with these decals is second to none, and while some consider it cheating, it far surpassed my painting abilities. Here the pilot's floor glass is added. The 410 was built with downward visibility for the pilot in mind. Work continues on the cockpit sidewalls with details such as the oxygen system painted blue and various switch panels enhanced or painted. Here I'm painting ResKit's tailwheel strut, which is a vast improvement over the kit part. Tiny levers from Quinta are added to the pilot's throttle. The completed cockpit assembly. The completed cockpit and gunner compartment are added, and the fuselage is joined. Additional holes are bored in the belly to accept the 20mm gun pod carried by some ME 410s. Here I'm modifying the 20mm gun pod in the bomb bay, known as an Umrüst Bausätze, or factory conversion kit. This bomb bay kit is what gave the 410 its unique U suffix and allowed the aircraft to be rapidly configured depending on the mission. Here I'm detail painting the main landing gear bays, which are all but invisible on the completed build, but I know they're in there. The downfall of almost all Messerschmitt kits in this scale are lack of the gravity-operated leading-edge slats. These slats were spring-operated and would deploy when the air resistance dropped below a certain level, meaning they were almost always open on the ground. This modification involved cutting the slats from the wings, thinning them, and building the walls underneath. Quickboost exhausts round out the kit Daimler-Benz engines, which were simply painted black as I elected to close the cowlings. Here I'm adding the small oil cooler radiators, which were enhanced with kit photo etch. The cowlings are added, showing the clean lines of the ME 410. This image shows the changes made to the ME 210 to address critical stability issues. These changes were so substantial they renamed the aircraft the 410. Tamiya putty is my preferred seam blender due to its fast drying time and ease of sanding. I follow this up with Mr. Surfacer 2000 to fill in any small sanding scratches. Flaps and ailerons are added, and a weird unnecessary seam on the flap is filled. Here I'm installing the elevators, which I added a slight droop to for visual interest. Using strip styrene, I build in a well behind the cutout slats. Small details like drilling out gun ports goes a long way towards the finished product. Final shaping and finishing of the leading edge slat wells. Here I'm adding a styrene shim to fill a gap that's too big for putty. The wings are added, giving the ME 410 Hornet its distinctive prop forward shape. I use a piece of tape stretched from wingtip to wingtip to ensure proper dihedral. Here I begin work on an additional 20mm pod fitted to the bottom of this 410. This pod also received the excellent master barrels turned metal barrels. The kit-supplied leather gasket boots were drilled and slipped over the metal barrels. Likewise, the MG 131s were modified with Master Barrels metal gun barrels. Here I began assembling the ME410's remote-controlled defensive gun sight assembly. The board funker looked through 3 different reflective gun sights to aim the rear guns, which were mounted in barbettes on the sides of the fuselage. As with the 110 and 210, the 410 had extensive tubular framing inside the canopy, thin tape to the rescue to mask and paint. Here I begin adding the large greenhouse canopy. Plenty of natural light for this crew. This multi-piece assembly truly tested my steady hand. Small lead wire to the rescue again, this time fabricating small handles for the windscreen. Unlike most fighters, the 410's forward gun sight hung upside down from the windscreen as there was no central instrument panel to mount it to. Eduard pre-cut canopy masks are required equipment for a canopy as complex as the ME410. I pre-shade my panel lines with black before any other colors are added. Here the white tailband is added. Early in the war, white meant Mediterranean theater, but later it signified Reich defense. Ultimately, it was an IFF or Identify Friend or Foe system for aircraft recognition. RLM-4 is added to the lower cowlings. Again, this was for IFF purposes, but on the lower surfaces, it was to aid anti-aircraft gunners. This particular 410 was finished in the standard Luftwaffe day fighter scheme of RLM 74 green, RLM 75 gray violet, and RLM 76 blue, with heavy modeling on the sides and tail. The upper camo colors were painted in what was called a splinter pattern with hard edges between colors. I sprayed the first color freehand, then used tape for the hard edges. Part of the enjoyment I find in painting Luftwaffe aircraft is that no two are typically the same, and you get to flex your airbrush skills with some complex schemes. Now for my favorite part, the modeling. The sides of mid to late war Luftwaffe aircraft typically carried the lower surface color and were covered with splotches of the two upper colors. Here, RLM 74 and 75 modeling is placed over the RLM 76. Here I'm making my own custom masks for the fuselage bulk and cruise markings, which were then painted white. The white areas were then masked in preparation for filling the crosses with RLM 74, which was standard at the time. My particular aircraft, 3UFP, work number 110050, was assigned to 2nd Group ZG-26 and was lost on December 22, 1943 after belly landing due to engine damage in combat. The pilot, Kurt Hofer, was killed, but Bordfunker Heinz Coleman survived the crash. Here I'm installing the large underwing engine coolant radiators. And here I'm adding the additional 20mm cannon pod to the belly. Here I'm installing the MG 131 machine gun barbettes. These guns packed a punch with a large round and high rate of fire, and Allied fighters quickly learned to avoid attacking the 410 from the rear. Post-war analysis of these turrets found them to be both effective and reliable. A coat of Tamiya clear gloss is applied in preparation for the few decals I used. Here I'm painting the propeller spinners in striking ZG26 colors. One-third of the spinner was painted white as a visual aid to ground crew that the engine was running. Allied aircraft typically had the propeller blade tips painted yellow for the same reason. Quickboost included a handy tool to set the propeller pitch correctly. Some sponge chipping with aluminum paint to weather the spinners, and a silver pencil on the prop blade edges to simulate wear. Stencil decals are applied over the cured gloss coat. These were further sealed with microsol. You'll notice I'm applying tiny numbers. Messerschmitt made fuselage sections modular to ease repairs, simply needing the section number to know what needed repair. The resin wheels from ResKit are splendid and a far cry better than the kit parts. They were painted dark gray and heavily weathered with dirt to reflect the rough fields sometimes used by the Luftwaffe. Lead wire again to add brake lines to the main landing gear legs. A heavily thinned acrylic burnt umber wash is applied to the exterior to add grime and highlight panel lines. An Me 410 B2U4, armed with the massive 50mm BK5 cannon, banks away after attacking B-17G Lady Godiva of the 388th Bomb Group over Brux, Czechoslovakia on May 12, 1944. Of note is the extensive exhaust staining from low-quality Luftwaffe fuel. Tamiya weathering pastels help develop the airbrushed exhaust stains. Various oils, acrylics, and washes help add to the grime of a combat aircraft. Additional sponge chipping is added to the front of the aircraft. Final small bits like the aileron mass balances, tailwheel bay doors, and slats are painted and attached. And finally, the canopies and antenna wires are attached to finish the build. By fall of 1944, all Me 410s had been removed from frontline service and relegated to photo reconnaissance roles. Today, only 2 airframes exist, at the RAF Museum in Cosford and 1 awaiting restoration at the Air and Space Museum. To see another Luftwaffe build, check out Andrew Horton's Bf-109 G6, also on the Flightline Media channel. To see another iconic World War II aircraft, check out my brother Dennis Sauter's IL-2 Sturmovik, also on the Flightline Media channel. To see more of my builds, look for my P-51B Mustang and A-31 Vengeance, also on the Flightline Media channel.